You must be in the wrong place. Samantha White's voice cut through the showroom, sharp and cold, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. Her eyes flicked over the wrinkled gray t-shirt, the worn sneakers, then settled on the sweat-slicked black face of David Cole. A mocking smile tugged at one corner of her lips. The cars here aren't meant for customers like you. A ripple of laughter rose from the back. A white couple glanced at David and whispered, "He's just here to look." A slick-haired young man in a shiny suit added, "Maybe he wants a selfie with the Lamborghini." Samantha snapped her fingernails against the edge of a glossy catalog, as though shooing away an inconvenience. "There's a used car lot at the end of the block. You might have better luck there." Without waiting for a response, she spun around, her fake smile instantly blooming as a white customer in a Zegna suit stepped through the door. "Welcome, sir. Right this way. The new Bentley just arrived, reserved only for our distinguished clients." The air in the showroom thickened with contempt. David stood still, his gaze unblinking. He didn't flare up, didn't lash out. Instead, he moved deeper into the row of gleaming cars, his hand brushing over the cold paint of a Mercedes AMG. In his eyes, there was no embarrassment of a man being insulted, only calm, razor-edged observation, the look of someone who had seen this theater play out far too many times. From across the room, Rachel Carter, a new hire of less than 3 months, witnessed everything. A single mother, she knew all too well what it meant to be judged by appearances, but seeing her coworker spit venom at a customer right at the front door tightened something in her chest. After a brief hesitation, she drew a deep breath, stepped forward, and offered a genuine smile. "Hello, sir. How can I help you today?" David turned to her, his deep, steady eyes catching hers. A fleeting smile crossed his face, one that seemed part gratitude, part test. No one in that room, not even Rachel, knew that the unassuming man before them was no ordinary customer. David Cole was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech empire and a special advisor to the U.S. Department of Justice, a man who had personally overseen investigations into corporate discrimination. And today, he wasn't just here to buy a car. He was here to witness and record the unvarnished truth of how a human being could be treated, reduced to skin color and clothes. Rachel opened the catalog in her hands, turning each page with a kind of reverence, her voice calm and professional. "This one's the newest Mercedes model, twin-turbo V8 engine, top speed over 190 miles per hour. It isn't just about performance, it's built for stability on long highways." David stood still. He didn't nod or feign interest like other customers. He simply observed, silent and focused. Then he asked, his voice low and decisive, "And fuel efficiency? How many miles to the gallon? And what about after-sales service here?" Rachel blinked, caught off guard. It wasn't the kind of question she got from passers-by who came just to gawk. She gathered herself and answered with detail. Nationwide warranty, a 5-year service package, benefits other sales staff usually glossed over. David's eyes flickered, not in surprise, but with the air of a man testing her, a silent judge seated behind an invisible bench. From across the room, Samantha's gaze burned with disdain. She leaned to a colleague, smirking. "I've seen his kind 100 times, ask every question, walk out with nothing." Other customers began to notice, their glances sliding over David with skepticism. The polished air of the showroom seemed to thicken, prejudice mixing with the scent of fresh leather into something suffocating. Still, Rachel pressed forward. She opened the door of a sleek coupe and gestured. "Would you like to try the seat? Feel the leather, the dashboard design. It's meant to enhance the driver's experience." David set his hand on the wheel, slow and deliberate. "And active safety systems?" he asked. "Automatic braking, collision alerts, lane control?" The way he asked made it clear. He knew far more than the average customer. Rachel found herself curious. She had never met anyone who probed this deeply. At that moment, a well-dressed couple swept through the door. Samantha darted toward them, voice suddenly dripping honey. "Welcome, sir, ma'am. May I show you the new Rolls-Royce Ghost? Direct import, reserved exclusively for VIP clients?" Their chatter rippled across the floor, muffling Rachel and David's conversation. But David didn't flinch. His eyes stayed fixed on the dashboard, calm and unreadable. Summoning her courage, Rachel said something unexpected. "You don't seem like someone who just came to look. I'd guess you know more about engineering than most of our customers." David smiled, a smile half admission, half test. "I only want to see whether people here sell cars with professionalism or with judgmental eyes." His voice dipped low, meant only for her. The words struck Rachel like a jolt. Her pulse quickened. This morning wasn't ordinary. Something bigger was unfolding right in front of her. From across the floor, Samantha sneered again under her breath. "Look at him, dreaming. One of these cars costs more than his house." But Rachel didn't hear. Her focus stayed locked on the man before her. She understood now. His questions weren't about answers. They were about whether she truly saw him as a customer who deserved respect. The showroom glowed with polished light, heels clicked on the tiles, doors opened and shut. But in the center of it all, only the taut thread of dialogue remained, strung tight between David and Rachel. On one side, the steady depth of a man insulted but unshaken. On the other, the sincerity of a young employee proving that respect was worth more than any facade of luxury. Rachel was still carefully explaining the autonomous driving features when David slowly closed the catalog and set it down on the glass table. He looked her straight in the eye, his voice calm yet heavy enough to stop the air in the room. "Thank you for the introduction, but I didn't come here for a standard coupe. I want to see the $1,000,000 class." For a moment, Rachel forgot to breathe. His words rang so clearly that several customers nearby turned their heads. A few yards away, Samantha burst into laughter, clapping her hand on her notepad as if she'd just heard a bad joke. "$1,000,000 class? What does he think this is, Beverly Hills? The only thing he's fit to drive is a used Camry." A ripple of chuckles followed. The air thickened with ridicule. Rachel glanced at Samantha, then steadied herself. Quickly flipping to the supercar section of the catalog, her finger landed on the shimmering silver Bugatti Chiron. "If that's truly what you want, I can arrange an appointment to see this model. Starting price is $3 million, direct import. Normally, the showroom only allows VIP clients to register for a viewing or test drive." Her words both confirmed his request and, delicately, showed she did not dismiss him. David leaned back in his chair, a faint, unreadable smile forming. "Good. Draw up the paperwork, and make sure her name is on the sales contract." Rachel froze, wide-eyed, while Samantha flushed red. Her voice turned sharp and bitter. "You don't get to choose. The sale credit goes to whoever greets the client first, and clearly, that was me." David turned toward her, his gaze like a blade. "Really? Funny. All I remember is you telling me to head down the street to a used car lot." The room fell silent. Rachel quickly opened the contract forms, her hand trembling slightly. Never in her life had she seen a client casually commit to a multi-million-dollar car, while deliberately writing the name of the newest employee on the deal. David signed with steady strokes, no hesitation, no opening for doubt. When he finished, he handed the papers back and asked evenly, "Do you know why I did that?" Rachel shook her head, though her eyes betrayed a rush of anticipation. David reached into his pocket and produced a sleek black pen with a tiny microphone clipped to its top. On the margin of the contract, he jotted a note: attitude, racial bias, disrespectful treatment. Then he closed it, pocketed the pen as if it were routine. Rachel stared, realizing he was documenting discriminatory behavior. Meanwhile, Samantha seethed. Dragging the manager over, she spat, "He's bluffing. Whatever he signed is worthless. I'm not letting some rookie steal my client." But before the manager could reply, David pulled out his phone and dialed. His voice dropped low, steady. "I need 2 men at the showroom. Bring the documents." No one heard the response on the other end, but Rachel noticed the flash in his eyes, sharper, colder than before. 15 minutes later, 2 men in black suits walked in, leather briefcases in hand. They bowed slightly. "Mr. Cole, we've brought the financial contracts and company files." The entire showroom fell silent. Samantha stiffened. The manager's face drained of color. Rachel's breath caught when she saw the name embossed on the portfolio: David Cole, CEO of a leading tech conglomerate. The same name she'd seen on the cover of Forbes just last month, above the line, "The man who changed the face of American technology." David wasn't there to show off. His gaze swept the room, pausing on Samantha, then finally settling on Rachel. "From this point forward," he said, calm but heavy as a gavel, "I only deal with her." The words were few, but they landed like thunder. Rachel realized instantly this morning wasn't just about selling a car. It was a test, and she was the only one who had passed. The name David Cole alone had sent shockwaves through the showroom. The manager scrambled to regain composure, forcing a twisted smile. "Mr. Cole, what an honor to have you here. Everything earlier was just a small misunderstanding." But David said nothing. He only nodded to his two aides and calmly signed a stack of paperwork that moved millions across the table as if it were nothing. Rachel's hands trembled as she saw her name listed clearly under sales representative. Samantha's face burned red. She gripped her notepad so tightly the edges curled, her eyes flashing with rage. From that day on, Rachel drew attention. Customers sought her out, curious about the new employee handpicked by a billionaire CEO. Her sales numbers surged, eclipsing all expectations. Samantha, once queen of the floor, found herself overshadowed by a junior colleague. Her jealousy hardened into malice. She began spreading rumors that Rachel had gotten lucky, that David Cole had staged the whole thing for publicity. Behind closed doors, Samantha even altered contracts, claiming Rachel's sales as her own, pulling strings with management to cut Rachel's commission. Rachel endured quietly, drained but patient. She knew the truth would surface. Then, one afternoon, a leak hit. In the break room, Samantha and a few colleagues laughed over their coffee. "Black folks only come here to look," Samantha sneered. "They should be grateful just to sit in real leather seats." Her mocking voice was captured by a junior employee's hidden phone camera. Less than a minute of footage, but enough to scorch the showroom's reputation. David received the clip directly from that employee, not through management. He quietly forwarded it to his attorney, then to an investigative journalist at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. 2 days later, the headline burned across the front page: "Luxury showroom accused of racial bias, staff mock black customers." The story cut like a knife, spreading like wildfire online. Former customers flooded social media. A black physician described being denied a test drive because he didn't look wealthy enough. A young entrepreneur posted an email showing his appointment was canceled with no explanation. Piece by piece, the puzzle formed a damning picture. Systemic discrimination baked into the showroom's culture for years. Rachel walked into work during the media storm with a heavy heart. Reporters crowded outside, cameras flashing. Customers inside slammed fists on desks, demanding answers. In the conference room, the manager wiped sweat from his brow, stammering, "It was just personal joking, not company policy." But the public wasn't buying it. Online, fury erupted. Thousands of comments called it a textbook case of racial profiling in luxury service. Hashtags for justice and equality dominated Twitter and Facebook. The showroom was ground zero for outrage. Samantha tried to salvage her standing. She approached Rachel, voice honeyed but laced with venom. "You think you've won? You're just a pawn in David Cole's little show. When this dies down, you'll disappear like dust." Rachel met her eyes and answered simply, "The difference between us is I treat customers like human beings, and that's something no one can take away." Through it all, David remained silent. No statements, no appearances, just quiet observation. But those who knew him understood. Silence was the warning. When he finally spoke, the fallout would stretch far beyond a single showroom. And indeed, the air now felt like the tense calm before a storm. Lightning already flashing, only waiting for the thunder that would shake everything apart. The climax was no longer about selling cars. It had become a battle between a culture of prejudice and a man with the power and will to drag it into the light. The showroom, once the stage for Atlanta's most exclusive cars, had transformed into the epicenter of a reckoning over justice, civil rights, and the undeniable truth that money could never conceal discrimination. The media storm had barely begun to cool when a new move sent Atlanta into an uproar. The U.S. Department of Justice formally launched an investigation into allegations of racial discrimination across the luxury auto retail industry. The announcement came on Monday morning, just hours after a second video surfaced. In this clip, not only Samantha but also the showroom manager appeared, his voice dripping with contempt. "I told you, don't waste test drives on black people. After they drive, they can't afford to sign anyway." The words were crystal clear, no room for denial. That same afternoon, DOJ agents walked into the showroom. Dark suits, expressionless faces, warrants displayed before live TV cameras broadcasting across Atlanta. Samantha tried to shout them down, claiming the footage was doctored, but a forensic technician pulled up the raw internal camera feed. Sharp video, perfect audio. Samantha sneering in the staff lounge. There was no escape. Rachel was called as a witness. She sat in the DOJ interview room, hands trembling slightly but her eyes steady. She recounted everything, from the moment David walked in to Samantha's insults. Her testimony matched the internal surveillance data word for word. A prosecutor nodded. "We need people like you, people who tell the truth." Rachel knew in that moment her life had just turned a corner. Meanwhile, Samantha and the manager faced relentless questioning. They pointed fingers at each other, sputtered excuses about jokes and not company policy. But DOJ had already lined up dozens of statements from former customers. A black physician testified, his voice tight with years of memory. "They told me to try the used lot. I'll never forget the contempt in their eyes." A military veteran stepped forward. "I wore plain clothes. They assumed I was unemployed. They had no idea I'd just come back from Afghanistan." Each testimony landed like nails hammered into the coffin of Samantha and the manager's careers. Then another piece of evidence dropped. Lobby footage from the very day David had walked in. Samantha's voice rang out, undeniable. "Black people will never drive one of these cars." No more denial, no more defense. The conference room fell into suffocating silence as pens scratched across seizure receipts. The press exploded. CNN, NBC News, and every major network ran the story on repeat. #justice. In Atlanta trended nationwide. Protesters gathered outside the showroom, holding banners demanding an end to racial profiling in luxury services. And in the eye of that storm, David finally stepped forward. The press conference was staged in a grand Atlanta hotel ballroom, packed wall to wall with reporters, cameras, and microphones. Rachel sat quietly in the back row, heart pounding, seeing David for the first time not as a humble customer, but as the powerful figure he truly was. He walked to the podium in a sharp black suit, the spotlight catching his calm face and burning eyes. No notes, no script. His voice rolled out deep, deliberate. "I wasn't just a customer at that showroom. I am a CEO, and I am also a special advisor to the U.S. Department of Justice. I have spent years watching how people are treated because of their skin color or the clothes they wear. And today I don't need to watch anymore. I've seen enough." The room erupted in camera flashes. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Cole, do you see this as the fault of a few individuals or a systemic problem?" David stared straight into the lens, his reply cutting like steel. "This isn't about one individual. This is about a culture, an invisible barrier that Black Americans face every single day. It's called racial profiling, and it is unlawful, unjust, and unacceptable in this country." The declaration sliced through every pretense. Samantha sat collapsed in a back room, the manager pale as ash. Across the nation, the image of a black CEO standing at a podium, exposing racism with calm precision, seared itself into the public consciousness. Rachel watched him, tears threatening. For the first time in her life, after years of being dismissed as a single mother, after months of being overlooked on the job, she felt a vindication. Justice was real. And sometimes it began with the smallest act, like the simple smile she'd given David when everyone else turned their back. The press conference closed in thunderous applause, but its aftershocks didn't fade. Civil rights groups rallied. Victims who had once stayed silent began to speak. And in the center of the rising wave, one name stood tall: David Cole, a symbol of truth, power and justice returned. The local courthouse was packed on the day of judgment. Outside, dozens of reporters jostled for space, camera flashes bursting nonstop. The once proud showroom sign in downtown Atlanta was now draped with a DOJ seizure tarp. From a gathering place of the elite, it had become a stained symbol of systemic discrimination. The ruling was swift. The showroom's business license revoked, the manager sentenced to probation with millions in civil penalties, Samantha White terminated and federally indicted for civil rights violations. Bitter smiles and stunned faces filled the room, a living lesson for the entire luxury service industry in America. Meanwhile, Rachel Carter stepped out of the courtroom with tear-stained eyes. She wasn't crying out of pity for anyone. She cried because, for the first time in her years of working-class struggle, she had seen justice stand with ordinary people. Her 6-year-old son ran into her arms, clutching her tightly. A photographer captured the moment. Within hours, the image went viral. The woman who smiled at the customer everyone else turned away. From a disregarded new hire, Rachel became the face of a nationwide campaign against discrimination in commerce. She was invited to speak at forums, to share her story on live television. A once precarious life opened onto a new path, not only in career, but in self-confidence. David Cole didn't leave Atlanta right away. Quietly, he met with local civil rights groups, funding legal aid for those who had faced discrimination. Publicly, he refused the label of hero. He said only this: "Justice doesn't begin in the courtroom. It begins the moment you choose to treat another person with dignity." For Rachel, he embodied those words. They kept in touch, not as CEO and employee, but as allies on the same journey. Atlanta slowly returned to its routines, but the luxury showroom scandal left a lasting imprint. Businesses across the country launched civil rights training. The media called it the Cole effect. Customers who had once stayed silent now found their courage. In cafes, on social media, in boardrooms, the story became a milestone. The first time a black CEO had not only exposed discrimination, but forced an entire system to bow. On his last night in Atlanta, David stood at his hotel window watching city lights flare against the sky. A DOJ aide asked softly, "Are you satisfied with today's outcome?" David answered slowly, "Satisfied? This was just one showroom. Out there are hundreds more. But at least today we stopped one more door from slamming in the face of a black customer. And that's a start." He turned, his eyes resolute, an unspoken vow. The story closed not with the fall of a showroom or the downfall of an individual, but with the rebirth of belief. Belief that even in the most glittering spaces where money seems to dictate all, truth and justice can still break through. Rachel understood this more than anyone. She had once felt the sting of contempt in someone's eyes, and she had also been the one to extend a hand instead, refusing to let prejudice win. In the dim glow of the city at night, one message rang clear. Justice doesn't need to be loud. It lives in the smallest choices, in a glance, a greeting, a chance we give another human being. And sometimes those seemingly small moments placed in the right hands can bring an entire system to its knees.